Text tool and parameters. In this lesson, you'll learn about text tool and everything single parameter that we have in Figma related to text tool. Take a look at this example here. As you can see, there are two columns of text. They're different. They look different. Everything looks different. Numbers, some letters, and also even some signs, like in this example here. How is it possible that that's exactly the same text and the same typeface, but we have different result? Let's take a look at another example here. Again, absolutely the same parameters for the text. Let's select this text here and here. As you can see in this panel, the parameters are completely the same. Completely the same, but the text looks completely different. How is it possible? These and some additional Figma Pro secrets related to text you will learn from this lesson. And let's get started. Well, first of all, before we start working with text, let's create a frame here. And we'll be creating text inside of the frame, not in the canvas. Now, here at the top, in the top panel, you see the text tool. We already discussed the top panel and what tools it has. You already know about that. It has text tool. And as you can see here below on the hover, you see that the hotkey, the shortcut for the text tool is T. So I'm not going to click on the tool from here, from this panel, because I want you to learn how to be efficient, and using the shortcuts is one of the best ways to become more efficient when you're working in any tool. So that's why what I'm going to do right now, I just press T and type somewhere in my frame to start creating text. Create text. I just created text with the parameters defined here in this panel. If you remember when we talked about shapes, we discussed all these panels, but it doesn't have the panel text. Well, just because it's not text, it's shape. Text parameter has the same parameters, the same panels as shape, but in addition to that, in addition to fill, stroke, effect, and export, it also has text panel. And that's exactly where you define and choose different settings for the text tool. By default, Figma provides you the panel and parameters that you need the most when you work with text. In most of the cases, it will be more than enough for you. But if you want to become more efficient and if you want to know Figma on much more advanced level, I'll tell you a couple of Figma Pro secrets today that will help you to get to the next level when it comes to text. Well, we created text here. Perfect. Awesome. Now what? Now you can change the parameters of this text. By default, as you can see, text doesn't have any drop-downs. It's just a tool as it is. And we use text absolutely everywhere, in graphic design, in mobile apps, in web design, and specifically in content creation. You will see that when it comes to content creation, it's all about text, almost all the time. So that's why it's super important to know as a designer, and even if you are not a designer, it's important to know how to work with text, because you see the text tool absolutely in every single design tool, whether we are talking about Canva, Illustrator, Photoshop, Sketch, Adobe XD, you name it. Even 3D tools also have the text tool. And here in Figma, we have text tool and all its parameters on the right side. In the right sidebar. Figma created the parameters that you see here, the fundamental, the most important parameters that you see here on the right sidebar in the text panel. It was created for digital designers, mostly for web designers. When you will take a look at all these parameters like line height, letter spacing, they have the names the same that you have in web design when you're creating like CSS styles, which is amazing, which is perfect. And now let's talk about all these different parameters so you become more efficient and you understand much more about Figma. The first thing that you see in this panel is the typeface. The first line is the typeface. When I click on this drop down, I see thousands of different typefaces here. Thousands. And all of them are typefaces. They're not fonts. There is a difference between typefaces and fonts. If you're not a designer, you don't have to know that, but if you're a designer, it's better to know the difference between the typefaces and fonts. Let me type this text with Helvetica here, so to explain you what's the difference between the font and typeface. This is my typeface Helvetica, and it's typeface. And here I'll create a font. Typeface, let me change some parameters here so you understand a little bit better that there is a difference between these two guys. So we have Helvetica as a typeface, and here font. What is font and what's the difference between them? Typeface is a font family. We can put the sign, equal sign here, font family. It's the family that covers and includes all the fonts, and it's called typeface. Font is a particular size and style of the typeface that you chose. So in this case, the font is Helvetica regular 64 points. This is font. This is typeface. The font can also be 48 if we change the size. The font can also be bold if you change the weight. And the font can also be bold oblique, or when you're working with other typefaces, it can also have different styles like italic. So oblique. These are all fonts, different fonts of the same typeface, Helvetica. And that's why you see the first one is Helvetica. And it can also be a different size. Let's imagine 32. These are all fonts. This is typeface. If you're a designer, when somebody told you, for example, to can we change actually our typefaces from like system typeface to something different? I really love Montserrat. Can we use Montserrat or at least Roboto? You are changing only the typeface here, but it means that you are changing the fonts as well, but only the typeface, the font family. Roboto, now it's all Roboto. The only difference will be in the final one. It's Roboto, not oblique, it's italic. Here we go. We just changed the typeface. But if somebody tells you to change the font to 24 points, which one? The bold one. Okay. So you are changing it to Roboto Bold 24. This is how it works, and this is the difference between the fonts and typeface. And now when you understand this difference, why it's cool to understand this difference, because it will help you in two different things. The first one is you understand that the first line is just the typeface in Figma, but three first lines combined create the font. And these are exactly the parameters that are used in CSS. If you talk to developers that work with CSS, in CSS, this will be written as font 64 px, for example, in this case. Then it will be 400, which stands for regular. If you want to know why the font regular called like can be presented in 400, I recommend you to take a look at the typography masters course that covers absolutely every single aspect of typefaces and fonts, so you'll become a super master in typography for UX UI design. let's get back. CSS, it will be font, 64 pixels, 400, Roboto. That's it. It can be also presented as different things like font size 64, then it will be font weight 400, and then font family Roboto. This is how it works, and as you can see, 3 parameters combined together create just one font, and this is the main difference, and this is why it makes you a little bit more efficient as a designer, because you also understand how it works on the background, how it works in CSS, so you understand how developers, for example, think, and you can present them your design the way they understand, and it also makes your work much more efficient. Done. So we discuss right now just 3 parameters for the text: typeface, then style. Style can also have condensed. Previously, Roboto had condensed as a separate typeface, Roboto condensed. That was the name of the typeface. And then they decided to include it into the style, specifically when the first variable fonts were created. So just keep in mind that this is the style of the typeface, and this is the size of the typeface. By default, you have lots of different parameters predefined, but you can just click here and change to whatever you want. 55, please, here it is. That's it. This is how you create the font parameters here. Let's take a look at our other parameters. The next parameter is line height. If you have experience in graphic design, it's also called leading. There is a difference between line height and leading. If you want to know the difference, again, Typography Masters course explain absolutely everything. Line height. Line height defines the height of the line of the text. So if this is the line height, it's 100%. What does it mean 100%? It means that the height of the line is exactly the height of the size of the typeface that we chose, of this font. So basically it's the same as 64. Nothing has changed in terms of the height here, as you can see. And line height can be presented in percentage, and it can be presented in points. So as you can see, without a percentage sign, it's just in points. With a percentage sign, it will be in percent. So if I put here 90%, now as you can see, the height of the text is different. It's 58, while our font size is 64. If I set here 150, it will be 96, which makes sense. This is line height. What does it mean in terms of like visual style? 150%. It means that 2 lines will have this distance between the text. So when I type something and then I press enter, second line will have this distance. And now when I change the line height to 100, for example, %, now it's much lower. It's important to understand, now you know that this is Figma Pro Secrets. The Figma Pro Secret, that math function works here as well. You can multiply it by 1.5, 100%, and then it will be 150%. If you want to have it presented in points, let's imagine 62 points, then you can set it as a 62 points. But if you want, if everything that you're creating related to line heights is in percentage, and you want to know exactly what is the percentage of the line height of 62, you can use the math function here in Figma. 62 divide by 64, the size of the typeface itself, multiply 100%. Enter, and now you understand that 62 points is 96.9%. Yeah, people don't know about that. Now you know about it. That you can use math function, and you can switch from points to percentage and back. So keep it in mind. The next parameter is letter spacing. Letter spacing, again, for graphic designers, also known as tracking. Tracking and letter spacing is absolutely the same thing. They just have different name. Leading and line height, semantically, they're different, but they will be presented the same way in Figma. Letter spacing and tracking is the same thing, is exactly the distance between letters. It can also be in percentage, but it can also be in pixels. Not in points, in pixels. Because if I set here, let's imagine 2, and I want to see it in points, it will switch to 2%. 2% of the typeface. But I can also present it in pixels, 2 pixels, and now it's different. It can be 20 pixels. And now it's much bigger, the distance, and it will be exactly 20 pixels. What's also important to understand that the letter spacing can be negative and positive. Negative, we need negative when we work with larger font sizes. When the font size is really huge, we have to compensate the default padding of the typeface, and in this case we'll use minus. Typography Masters course explains all the secrets of typography, so take a look at that. We'll also discuss some of these things in the module about web design, when we'll start working with titles, headings, and also the paragraphs. But it also, as you can see, it's negative, but it also can be positive, plus 20% or just 20%, and now we have the positive letter spacing. The next parameter is paragraph spacing. What is paragraph spacing? The paragraph spacing is, let's imagine that, let's get back to our 0% here. So let's imagine, enter. We have 2 paragraphs. And when I have the text like this that consists of only 2 lines, and let's imagine that I want to have a bigger distance between the first line and the second line, I can just change the line height, and that's it. But these are 2 different paragraphs. These are not just 2 lines. So we can set the paragraph spacing. Can be, let's set to 20, for example. Maybe you don't see the difference, but honestly, as you can see here, the line height stayed the same. It's 100%. But the distance between the lines is bigger now. It's really useful when you work with paragraphs. And the paragraph is different than just a line of text. Let me do some things here. So here I have text 2, in this case 3, but let's make 2. We have 2 sentences. If I change the line height to 200%, this is how text looks right now. And I don't want that. I want it to be 100, but I want to have different spacing between paragraphs. In this case, I change it to, let's imagine, 64, which is exactly the size of our font. So I'm basically adding 1 additional line between paragraphs. I press enter, and now I have 2 paragraphs divided between each other. This is useful specifically when you copy lots of text from somewhere, or when you're typing a lot of different paragraphs, and then you want to see visually the difference between, like, the distance between paragraphs when it's just one piece of text. And then you use this function, and it works exactly the same when we are talking about web design. It works exactly the same as the function in CSS as paragraph margin bottom, P style in CSS, margin bottom 64 pixels. This will be exactly the same. So that's why it's really cool to use this feature. So now you understand how it works. By default, it's 0, which means that we'll see text, everything like will be combined to each other. The next 3 parameters that you see here is a really cool thing that defines the bounding box of the text. So this is the bounding box of the text. Every single text that you are creating has a bounding box. By default, most likely you have auto width. It means that the entire text will take all the space, no matter how much I type here. As you can see, while I'm typing, the width is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it will completely do it the same way. And you can't, when you set the auto width, you can't change the width and height of the text. But if you want to change them, in this case, you press auto height or fixed size. What is auto height? Auto height, you click on that, and the height will be defined by the line height of the text. But you can change the width. And let's imagine that we want to have width 160 pixels for better legibility, for example, of the text. 160 points here, the width, and height is 192 because we have 3 lines of text with a line height 100%, which is also 64 points, 64 multiple 3 lines, 192. And this is auto height. So the height will be defined by the line height of the text. And the final type, if I duplicate this text here, the final one is fixed size. Fixed size means that when I click on that, now I can change height and width of our bounding box. So I can change the bounding box, I can make it smaller, bigger, whatever, and this is what I see in the text here. And you might think, but where can I use actually the fixed size while auto height works already perfectly? Well, sometimes in some of the cases, specifically in UI design, you need to define the position of the text. And let's imagine to align text together, one column of text with another column of text. And then you might need these things: align top, align middle, and align bottom. When I have the auto height, when I set align bottom, text didn't change. Align middle, text didn't change. Align top, it doesn't matter what I set here, text doesn't change. Why? Because the height is already predefined and text, the box itself, doesn't have space for text to move. But when we set the fixed size, when I set the align middle, text will be in the middle. When I say align bottom, the text will be at the bottom. This is specifically useful when you need to align text. Let's imagine in mobile design, when you have some title here on the left side, and on this side, let me duplicate it, and let's imagine that here I have see more, but it's aligned to the right and it's much smaller typeface. All the numbers here are much bigger, so you can see them. So that's why when you see that I'm doing something, it's just that the number is 24. It's really huge for mobile application. But just because I show it to you, when we'll be talking about mobile application, we'll use the exact size for mobile apps. And it will be in one of the next modules. So here I have text, see more, and I have a title. And this will define our, let's imagine here I'll have the card of text. And you remember that we can use plugins to define some kind of images here at the bottom. And let's choose just any random one from here. Done. Title, see more. And see more is not aligned with text. So I can align it this way, doesn't look cool. I can align it by the baseline, it doesn't look well. So in this case, a really cool feature that you can use, you can align them using this tool, one of the ways to do that, Or another way to do that here in Figma without alignment tool is to select the text itself and choose the height 64 for this text. You set it 64, and then you set the alignment, align middle. Now see more as a link is aligned in the middle with a title. This is where you can use the fixed size. This is just one of the examples. It's used a lot in graphic design. So keep in mind that you can use all this function to create this type of text here. But also it's really important to know, because in some cases when you create text using drag, you create a bounding box, you start typing text, and then you don't understand how to actually change it. What happened, why I have the box here? Well, it means that you have fixed size for the text. Switch it to auto width, and you will have the text itself. At the same time, some people don't understand. So I have text, but why can't I change the width and height of it? This is because you have auto width here. And the way to change that, you just use mouse here, or you set the parameters here, and that's it. So we discussed one additional thing, cool. And the final parameter that is left is here, text align left, text align center, and text align right. This is what we will use a lot, specifically when we work with landing pages, web design, and mobile vacations, and of course, like absolutely everywhere. So you have some kind of text here, right? And this is the text aligned to the left. You can align it to the middle. Let's align this one to the middle, to center, and another text will be aligned to the right. Also, I recommend you, again, remember the hotkeys for that. When you hover, you see exactly the hotkeys that you can use. And you can see that Option Command L, text align left, left, left. Everything is aligned to the left. Now select all the text, Option Command right, everything aligned to the right. This is specifically useful when you need to align everything super fast, left and left. Now all the text is on the left side. When we'll be talking about alignment panel, this is where you'll learn how to do it super fast. This makes you super efficient. So we just covered the basic, the fundamental parameters here in Figma. I want to give you one additional Figma Pro tip here, Figma Pro secret, that by default here in Figma you see hundreds, thousands of different typefaces, because it shows you the typefaces from installed on your computer and also from Google Fonts. But in Figma, you can go to Preferences, and there is a parameter, Show Google Fonts. If you click deselect this parameter, then you will see only typefaces that are installed on your computer and nothing else. Only the typefaces installed on your computer. This will allow you to save hundreds of your cognitive load, because you will become much more efficient when you have and use only the typefaces that are installed on your computer. When you need to select something, you already know what you will be working with, and it will be much easier for you to choose them from this panel rather than working with the thousands, show Google Fonts, now thousands of different typefaces. Sometimes more is not better. And having thousands of different typefaces is not better. It's better to have five, just five, that you know well and you work with them, rather than having thousands and spending hundreds of your hours, of your time, of your minute, of your precious time choosing the typeface from thousands of different options, when you, from the very beginning, knew that you will be using Montserrat, Lato, Inter, or Roboto. So keep it in mind that this is the option, this is the Figma Pro secret that you can use in your life. In the next part, I don't want to overwhelm you with everything at once. In the next part, right below this video, you will see another video, part 2, when we'll be talking about text parameters and where we will discuss this more option, type settings. When we click on that, we'll see some additional things that we can work with, but we will discuss them in the next part. So see you in the next video.